So let's begin. First thing you're going to need is your water soluble thread. The reason that we use water soluble thread on a project like this is because we want to be able to take those extra stitches out at the end and not have them show. So instead of having to unpick or do anything nasty like that, what we're going to do is use water soluble thread, which will just come away with a Q-tip and a little bit of water from the tap. Water soluble thread is of course available from our website. Now, I'm threading up my first colour to stitch with, which is actually going to be colourway 2, and I'm using a dark teal colour. And this embroidery is going to sit on the centre point of each edge, and it's done with almost an asterisk style stitching. You will notice that it appears I'm stitching at an incredible speed here. That's because I don't want to bore you too much. So I've popped, excuse the camera while I just sort that out. So what I've done is I've sped this up so that you can work through the video at a reasonable pace. Gotta love camera issues. I do apologize, guys. I'm a person who has to trim as they go. I hate seeing threads there on our fabrics. Okay, so that is all of that stitching completed. The next part that we're going to look at is doing our applique. And for my block, this is the deep purpley wine coloured applique. So we lay, first of all, we stitch out the segment, then we lay fabric over. Now, a question that I often get asked, because we are going to repeat this 4 times, is why don't I just make a larger shape? The reason I don't make a larger shape is because it would waste so much fabric, and at the end of the day I'm kind of stingy. So we are going to do each of these segments one by one. So that was colorway 4. Now I'm going to trim around, and you can see I'm using my curved tip scissors there, which for me are the best way to do any trimming. They are of course available on our website. And now we are going to, once we've finished trimming away, remembering not to cut through any of the threads below, now we're going to come along and I'm going to repeat the process with the other 3 segments. And I'm going to do that on a little bit of high speed, just because I like showing off how quickly I can work for you. Okay, so we'll trim away that one, and here we come up to the last of these purple pieces. Now, at this stage, what we're going to do is our satin stitch, and this will be color number 11. So we are going to load that thread up and stitch out the satin stitch. Now the satin stitch that I use is a it's slightly wider than a standard. A standard satin stitch is about 2 to 2.5 millimeters. I like to use a 2.5 to 3 millimeters just because I find it gives you a sexier stitch. And then I also pop on it a running stitch around the outside of the satin stitch, and it just finishes it off beautifully. So we're going to do that stitching around, and we're only doing it around the top sections here because the rest of it is going to be covered up with other stitching, and I don't want too much bulk showing at the end of our project. So we want to make sure that our stitches and the block itself is as flexible and as luscious as possible. So this is the last of the stitching that we're going to be doing here, and then we're going to move on to our next color. And the next color for me is this beautiful wine pink color, not wine, peony pink color. So we're going to thread our machine up and come through. Oh, don't you love automatic threading? The threading on the Janome 15,000 is just stunning. And we're going to repeat the process. So we'll do the first one together and then I'll speed through. Once again, it's an orange peel like slice. We lay the fabric down on top of that. And I get really stingy. I'm more likely to underlay the fabric and have to do it again than I am to have too much fabric on the sides. I try when I'm doing designs such as this to not use a directional fabric. So what I don't want is to see constantly the like a direction going in my fabric. So bubbles that I've chosen here is just perfect because it doesn't matter which way I lay the fabric around. Of course, if you're willing to use a little more fabric, feel free to use a directional fabric. And now we'll just speed through the other 3 of those peels. I like doing things on fast forward. It makes me look really efficient. And we come through. And now we're going to satin stitch all around the pink segments. Now I am speeding up because it is satin stitch. It can get a little boring, so I don't want to bore you too much, but I do of course want to give you all the details and show you exactly what we are doing. So again, it has that triple stitch detail, which is just so beautiful. And you can see that that wash away thread is really holding the project firmly in the hoop. There is no issue there whatsoever. And we come through. How compulsive am I that I just had to stop the machine to do a trim even when I knew the camera was running? It's kind of disturbing. I just can't help myself, I got to be honest. Now, when it comes to choosing colours, choose what you like. I am planning on doing my quilt in 4 different colours, and I've bought the fabrics for that. You can use up scraps and have a beautiful colourful quilt, which would probably be much more in tradition with the with Turkish and Moroccan style tiles, but it is whatever works for you personally. And when I've bought my fabrics, I've bought about 1/2 metre of each fabric. Okay, just those little inner details there. Okay, and now we are on to the next set of stitching, which we're going to do with this beautiful medium teal colour. I just think this colour is beautiful and it's looking great on the quilt so far. So I'm going to load it up, and in this part of the stitching we're actually not using any fabric. This is just a sexy satin stitch that is going to cover off all of the details that we haven't sort of stitched through, and add to the quilt design. So it's very much a feather design that it's stitching here. And the way that I've created it is so that the stitches are going in an outwards pattern on each side, keeping the I'm just looking for the right words here, keeping the angles and geometry is probably the better word, keeping the geometry of what we're doing very, very equal. Now this is going to take some time, even with me increasing the speed that I'm doing this. You would have to be stitching at about 6,000 stitches a minute to be stitching this quick, and of course we all know that our machines do not stitch at that speed. It's one of those things, I really don't want to bore you by making you watch a 2-hour video of the machine working. So we speed it up to make it more fun for you to watch. Wouldn't it be great though if this was the speed that our machines did work at? I could probably deal with that. And you can see we're coming up on nearly halfway through. So this is colorway 21, and this block has 23 colors in it. This is of course the longest part of the design, doing all the satin stitching. It's one of the reasons I love Applique, because Applique is just so quick. And what you would be, so we're doing, I think we're doing 1 block of this quilt. I'm just having a quick look of how many blocks of this quilt are used. And yes, it is just the single block of this quilt. But other things that you could use the quilt, this block for, it would make some beautiful cushions. Like, you know, home decor to match things is just lovely. Also think about, from the project itself, how easy it would be to make things like pot holders or table runners as you go along with your stitching. So you can absolutely think outside of the block in what you do, and it's a great way to test sew then as well, and to practice with the block. So we're a little more than halfway through now. And you can see that satin is just stunning. I'd love for people to give me pictures to show me what colours they're actually using. I always love the inspiration and the way people have the ability to interpret everything that we do just within crafting, certainly, just by changing colours. And we're on the second last panel now. Now remember, these designs are multi-formatted for all machines, as well as multi-sized. So I'm using a 9-inch size, and therefore the fabric that I've cut was 11 inches for all of my blocks. By the same token, if you have a 5-inch hoop, and that's the size that you wish to use, then you would be cutting 7-inch blocks to start with. Okay, and we're coming up on the end of our stitching here. And I'm just loving the way that looks. The colours are really popping. Excuse me while I go and change threads. You do want to be using bobbin fill. Anything else you'll find is just going to make everything too thick. Okay, so my stitching is complete, and now I am going to place the wash away thread on the machine again, and we're getting ready to add the backing onto our project. So we don't take away the poly mesh, we leave the poly mesh in there. It is fine. It is not going to do anything negative to your quilt over the years. But if you used a tear away, all the fibres would be sitting under there and clumping under there as the years passed. So take your quilt wadding. Mine is whatever I have around the house. And we are going to take that wadding, lay it on the back of the hoop, and stitch the next colorway. That is going to allow us to then remove the hoop, trim away the excess wadding so that it's just the hoop size. That way nothing's going to get caught in our seams before we lay our backing fabric on top. And I've got my backing fabric. Again, whatever you've got is fine, and you could make your back as interesting as the front of the quilt if you wish, simply by using different colours on your backs. At this point, if you want to use a coloured thread in your in the back of your quilt, this is where you would change the bobbin now. Because I'm using a white backing, I don't need to do that. And I'm going to come along and pop the hoop on, and then I'm going to stitch out colorway 22, which is going to baste the backings to the project. And the reason that we need to do this again is because our project has shrunk as we've stitched. As you add stitches to the fabric, the project shrinks. It is just what it is. So we need to come through and rebaste, and that is going to give us our new size definition as well. Obviously we want to be, you may need to play with your tension a little bit to get the best tension for your machine. You don't want it to be sucking in more than, say, 2 or 3 millimeters. Anything more than that, and you'd want to look at the tension issue of what's happening with your machine. And now I can come through and I can load up my quilting thread I'm using white because I'm using a white background. So all of the quilting here is done in the white areas of the quilt. And we just come through, and of course we're on colorway 23 now, and this is just going to do all this beautiful detail quilting. So it does look like it has been custom quilted, and remember that you get the quilt block of the actual quilting design that I have created for this as well, which you can use in other projects for personal use. Great for quilting alternate blocks and all those little projects that you might want to create. And let's come through. Oh, and this is, nope. I'm trying to make sure that you guys can see exactly how gorgeous the quilting looks. And I'm hoping, a lot of it's difficult to see, I will say, because the machine's moving so quickly. But it is just stunning to see the quilting as it becomes a part of the design and how much it makes the stitches then pop up. So we're going to go through and quilt each section, and you can see we're just at the end now, and it is looking stunning. And here we go. I think we're just going to come across to the end now. And there we have it. And what you can see now is our finished block. As I run my Q-tip around that design, what you will notice is that the stitches on the outside edge will come away and just disappear because we've used the water-soluble thread. Generally speaking, I don't do that until the point when I've joined the blocks together. Of course, for joining the blocks together, check out our video on how to join Quilt As You Go blocks together, and we look forward to seeing you next month for the next block in the Rock the Casbah collection. Until next time, bye.